Hello, church family. It's Friday, and today we remember Crucifixion Friday. It was a day whenever the Son of God willingly took the cross of Calvary upon himself to take the whole sin of all of humanity upon himself at the cross that day. And whenever you look at Crucifixion Friday and you look at the Gospels, and you see the recorded words of Christ, there was not a whole lot that Christ said while he was there during those last hours in agony and pain as he was nailed there cruelly at that cross. But whenever we look at what's recorded and what Jesus said, what he said was eternally impactful. And I just want to take a few moments, if we will, to just look at some of what he said, a couple points out of his message as he spoke there about to die. And one thing that Christ said, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And that's really impactful whenever you look back at Psalms chapter 22, because David himself recognizes that God is holy. He recognizes the holiness of God. And just as Jesus is doing there at the cross, himself was recognizing the holiness of God. It was God that couldn't even look at his Son upon the cross of Calvary, because at that moment that Jesus Christ himself was taking the very sin of all the world upon himself at the cross. Dr. Adrian Rogers shares about this historical moment in history when he says, in that terrible moment, Jesus was lonely. He was forsaken by his friends, and then a shadow comes for the first time since eternity began between God the Father and God the Son, because God cannot look upon sin. In that moment, God was taking your sin and my sin upon himself through his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ. And why is that important? It's important because during the 33 years of Christ's ministry upon this earth that he lived, he was of no sin. He had never sinned. He'd never had evil thoughts. He never had lied and done all the selfish things that we do out of the flesh as human beings daily. And all of a sudden, at that moment, for the first time in Christ's life, he was experiencing the full impact of sin, and really the eternal impact of sin upon himself at the cross. And secondly, let's look at what Jesus said there. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so the soldiers nailed Jesus there at the cross, and they're gambling for his garments, and they're sitting there, they've spat upon him, they've ridiculed him, they've punished him, they've tried to embarrass him. And even Jesus, while he's still there, he's there as humble as he can be. Doesn't say a word, but he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You know, God's original plan in the Garden of Eden didn't necessarily have anything with the cross in mind at that moment whenever mankind was created. He didn't have a rescue that he had in plan at that moment whenever mankind was created through the first Adam. But whenever Adam and Eve rebelled, whenever humanity rebelled against God and his edict, that moment mankind was separated out of relationship from God, and sin has entered humanity. And at that moment, mankind was eternally separated from God, and God knew that the only way that humanity could be restored in this relationship in which he had originally designed there in Eden would eventually be through his Son, Jesus Christ, coming to restore that separation that man had between him and God. And then I want you to look at this morning, it is finished. Jesus says, it is finished. God gave Jesus a job to do. Dr. Billy Graham shared one time, I'll never forget it, he says, Jesus was born with a death sentence upon him. He was the only one who was qualified and equipped and able to do the redemptive work of restoring a broken relationship between God and man. And that's you and I. That's our sin. that Jesus took upon himself at the cross. And in those final moments, as he lays there about to give up his spirit, he says, "It is finished." And that moment sealed the hope for eternity for you and for I and for the world, for eternity. But the question is, as we think about this Crucifixion Friday, what will we do with the cross? Because if you've never been born again, if you've never confessed your sin to God, if you've never chosen to receive Jesus Christ into your life and to proclaim him as Lord, as master of every area of your life, then you have to deal with the reality that Jesus not only died to save you, but he's given you an open invitation, the work of being eternally finished for you to have a relationship with God has been done, but you have to choose to receive it into your life. And today, for those of you that have been born again, what are you going to do with the cross this Easter? How are you going to reflect upon your life and your relationship with the Lord? And how are you going to enter, not just to the sanctuary to worship him, but how is your life daily going to be an example and a reflection of Christ and a consistent worship unto the Lord? And how are you taking this gospel work that God did at the cross through his Son, how are you going to take it and take it to your neighbor, into a lost and dying world in need of the saving grace of Jesus Christ? I pray that you will be prayerful about that, and that this Easter and that this Resurrection Friday will be one that will be unlike any other you've ever experienced.